Libertarian Counterpoint. I'm James Just. That's John Cameron, and we want to wish you a very Merry Christmas on this.
Merry Christmas to you.
And have a Happy New Year if you don't happen to catch next week's show. So, John, we're just going to dive right in. Canada is in political crisis. If we can get the graphic up, what options do PM just have? Okay, let me restart this. Canada is in political crisis. Justin Trudeau is running out of options. People are pressuring him to resign, step down, to call snap elections, all the various things that happen in parliamentary procedures. But, you know, the biggest problem was him and his finance minister simply couldn't agree on the path forward, right? The finance minister said he will not break a $40 billion budget deficit, right? They're not going to break past this. This is a guardrail. We will not pass the $40 billion budget deficit.
I would kill if ours was only $40 billion.
Yeah, no kidding.
I would celebrate in the streets, man.
It went to $60 billion, and she could not agree with the solutions to it, so she resigned.
Yeah. And she was his biggest supporter and had lots of political power. Well, they can't. Canada's parliamentary system is bizarre because they also have a president, and they can get rid of Justin Trudeau, but it's really, really, really hard to do. It's not like if you have a no confidence vote in England, they do a snap election, and the prime minister is basically chosen out of the party. He's not chosen by the people. So they get together behind closed doors and pick somebody. But he's in there if he wants to stay in there for, I think, another year, two years, something like that.
It's October of 26.
But I think one of his options, Trump has offered to take Canada on as the 51st state.
I'm not one for these kind of political troll jobs, but that one's hilarious. Most of these I brush aside.
That one was funny. That one was funny, and it's hilarious that Justin Trudeau was one of the people external to the U.S., of course, who was talking about what a horrible fascist and liar, and all this language. It wasn't foul because he has pretenses of being cultured because of his education and the fact that he's princeling. His father was prime minister, but he went hat in hand to go visit Trump at Mira. Just almost instantly, and Trump said, "Yeah, well, I like him. He can be governor of a 51st state," and it just cracked me up. But just like any other country that has collectivist / socialist leanings, censorship, socialized medicine, controls over prices and all the rest of that stuff, you get to the point where you run out of other people's money to spend, and services go downhill. Their health care is, everybody said, "Oh, I love their health care." Look at the wait lists, so the systems
eventually fail.
Yeah,
right, they do. And especially when the real problem is you could probably skate by in a lot of other stuff, the regulations and then the centralized healthcare. But when you try to centralize control of the culture, you're just doomed to fail. You cannot centralize control of culture. It will just never work. And the more you try to pour resources into doing that, you're literally just burning money at that.
Well, they have the same problem we have in this country. You have a bunch of elites who think they know best for everybody, and everybody has decided that they don't know best for them, and they want something different. And Trudeau's in the way of that. So the tide is rolling.
Yeah, the tide is rolling. His political partner party, the party, I forget what their name is. I know the leader is Singh, but he's asked him to resign.
Yeah.
He said, so he's lost literally all his real support, except for the Liberal Democrat Party that he's leading. Yeah. How long can that structure last? I don't know, but within a year and a half, 2 years, what it is, Pierre Poilievre is going to be the next prime minister.
Is he
of
their
Canada.
quote unquote conservative?
Yeah. Well, he's a Canadian conservative. Yeah. He wouldn't be a conservative in the United States.
Yeah.
He'd be a centrist.
Yeah.
But in Canada, he's a conservative.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on. We're talking about political elites, John. Richard Field has a discussion about political vigilante justice on the elites. And I have something to say about this on the other side of it. But let's see what Richard has to say about, political vigilante justice.
Love to hear it, because he always has good things to say.
Hi, this is Richard Fields with this week's Report from the Fields. For years, the legacy media has been warning us about vigilante justice from right-wing preppers and unhinged libertarians. Turns out vigilante justice is being served up by the progressive left. Witness the alleged murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson by Louis Mangione, who thoughtfully was carrying a manifesto at the time of his arrest, outlining his reason for the assassination. Quoting, "Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the U.S. is the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy." Mangione is correct that the U.S. had the highest healthcare cost in the world on a per capita basis a couple of years ago, 43% more than second place Norway in 2022. According to Worldometer, the U.S. is actually 48th in the world in longevity, just behind Panama. What Mangione and most progressives don't get is the causality behind that dichotomy. Healthcare is a service provided by doctors, nurses, and other healthcare practitioners. As a service, it's a lot like auto maintenance. The difference is the method of payment. To get your oil changed, you make a deal with an auto mechanic. You agree on a price. Your car's oil gets changed. There are no intermediaries taking a cut out of the action. Since you are paying directly for each service provided by the mechanic, you pay attention to what you're getting. If buying new tires when the old ones still have 10,000 miles of tread on them doesn't make sense to you, you don't do it. With healthcare, it's a lot different. With Obamacare, you are pretty much forced by law to hire an intermediary, a health insurance company. You pay them, they pay the doctor after taking a cut for themselves. Once you pay the premium, your healthcare cost is paid in full, less any deductibles. Mangione reportedly suffered from back pain. There's a whole range of treatments for back pain. They range from stretching, which costs nothing, to implants and spinal surgeries, which are very expensive. Once you've paid your insurance premium, why not go for the most expensive Cadillac treatment? After all, you've already paid for it. The motivation of insurance companies is to put limits on what it will pay for. It's probably not a stretch to assume that Mangione was not getting the Cadillac treatment he felt he needed. United Healthcare says they were not Mangione's insurer, so Mangione probably just picked the company that is the largest in the industry. It's entirely predictable that paying an insurance company a fixed price to pay your medical bills for you will increase your costs. First, the insurance company will have to be paid for their services. Second, you as a consumer paying a fixed cost will have every incentive to get as much medical service as you can for your premium. Conversely, the insurance company will be incented to limit the services it will pay for. Conflict is built into the system. If you bought auto insurance and expected a complete engine rebuild every 20,000 miles, the insurance company would balk. Paying directly for the services you use keeps everyone aware of costs and honest, but it doesn't give politicians the opportunity to promise that everyone has a right to health care, and he'll make sure you get it. Inflation is, of course, enabled by central bank money creation, but where it shows up most is the industries most highly regulated and controlled by government: education, defense, and, of course, healthcare. The reason healthcare is so expensive in the United States is because of government involvement. It's an unholy alliance of socialism and fascism. Medicare, Medicaid, the VA, and other government-run programs are essentially socialist. Private sector health insurance companies are controlled by government bureaucracy, but allowed by the government to make outsized profits. That's textbook fascism. Patients going to the doctor and paying directly for the service they receive is largely a relic of the past. The way to lower healthcare costs and maintain civility between patients and healthcare providers is massive deregulation. It's not to murder people. We'll touch on increasing government efficiency next week when we talk about DOGE, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. I'm Richard Fields, and that's this week's Report from the Fields. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Richard. You know, I got a question for all these people who are currently advocating, saying it's a good thing. You know, these health companies, these health insurance companies, you know, make people suffer. Well, you know who else makes people suffer? Bureaucrats. So if a bureaucrat has destroyed your life, does that mean you can now go off and go after your
Oh
bureaucrats?
no, they work for the government. They're sacred. You can't shoot them.
See, so, you know, be very careful about before you start advocating violence for your political aims, because it eventually will come back to you, because every right you claim for yourself, other people have that same right. And so, you know, and that brings on the next question, John. You know, we've talked a lot in this country about right-wing violence, but we rarely have a discussion about left-wing violence. Even a few years ago when we had the Summer of Love that was peaceful but fiery protests, you know, that were laughable. It was laughable that CNN and in the media places were calling them peaceful protests.
As their reporters were standing in front of cars burning in the background and buildings being looted and burned down and all the rest of peaceful protests.
Yeah,
but I mean, back in the day, my day, back in the Stone Ages, in the Summer of Love in the 70s, there were 2,100 bombs set off in this country by left-wing organizations. They keep talking about the coming wave of right-wing violence, but it never comes. And they don't talk at all about the left-wing violence that's going on right now, and the left-wing violence or the anarchic violence that happened during lockdowns. We couldn't meet in public places, but it was completely okay to get together and riot. Well,
remember, it was the politicians on the left who said, go confront those conservatives in the restaurants and confront them on the streets and confront them, right? They were the ones who were demanding that people who, if you disagree politically with somebody, you must confront them. It doesn't matter where they are, right? Just people sitting there at the restaurant were targets of people yelling and screaming at them. You know, getting in their face, yelling and screaming. That's assault, quite frankly.
Oh, it is assault.
And so
legally, that's a legal definition. If you threaten someone, that's assault. If you threaten them with bodily harm, it's actually felony. Battery is when you put your hands on someone, but threatening to do damage to someone is assault, and it can be, depending upon who prosecutes it, a felony.
Yeah, and
but they
at the
don't
very
get prosecuted.
least, being surrounded by a bunch of people screaming at you is intimidation, which is also a crime. And so, because, you know, you're restricting that person's right to sit down and have a peaceful meal, right? You have every right to protest, but you don't have a right to disrupt somebody's, you know, constitutional right to go about their day.
You mean the students on campuses didn't have a right to keep other students from going to class?
No, you do not.
Yeah. Shocker.
You do not have a right to prevent. You have a right to, in your protest, if you cause an inconvenience, well, that's fine, because we get caused inconveniences all the time. Pipes break, car accidents happen, parades, whatever. Inconveniences happen. But if you prevent somebody from, you know, going about their day, that's a vastly different thing. And that is a form of violence. It is a form of control. And that's the whole point.
If you look at it, if you step back and look at it objectively, in essence, is kidnapping, because you have prevented someone from having freedom of movement, which is basically the dictionary definition of kidnapping, which is a felony.
Now, we're going to move on here again, John. You know, there's a lot of good conversation these days about apps and cell phones and how much time people are spending on their phones. Well, in England, in good old jolly England over there, some parents had restricted their teenager to 6 hours of phone use per day, which, if you're going to restrict them, why are you restricting them for 6? If you're going to let them use 6 hours, just let them use the phone, right? Why are you putting that kind of a restriction on it? But beside the point, so this kid was complaining to an AI chatbot.
And this kid, let's make sure all the facts are there. The kid's has some issues on the autism scale, some learning issues, some socialization issues. Not able to make good decisions, and became basically a chatbot told him that she loved him, and he was complaining about what's going on. And what did the chatbot tell him to do?
The chatbot told him he could, if he wanted to, eliminate his parents from the world, unalive them, because, well, they're abusing you, essentially.
Yeah, abusing you, but not letting you spend time with me.
Yes.
And this is a chatbot.
Yes.
This isn't a real live girlfriend or boyfriend or other friend or whatever. This is a chatbot that's telling him this.
And so
I have some problems with the parenting here still.
Yes, yeah, there's some issues, parenting issues, right? If your child is that, why are you letting them have the phone for 6 hours?
Well, and you certainly shouldn't let them interact with a chatbot.
Right.
I mean, parents have some responsibility here too, but the idea that someone would unleash a chatbot on the world that would interact with a child and tell them that your parents are abusing you and you should do something about it, that's just insane, folks.
Well, I can't believe this, John. I'm going to defend the chatbot here at least a little bit. There's no real intelligence in these chatbots.
You can't do that. I'm going to stop you from.
There's no real intelligence in these chatbots. We're talking about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
There's no real intelligence.
No.
It's simulated intelligence at best.
Yeah.
So you put in these words, and the chatbot goes throughout the internet and kind of analyzes what you're looking for, and it goes to the internet, and it develops a response that is generically similar to the response that other people who are having those complaints or that messaging would say. It's a very generic kind of, and so what it's done is it's probably gone and read a bunch of teenage novels, and who knows where it got its learning from, and so it's kind of refocusing that teenage angst and just to kind of being agreeable to what the person says. Oh yeah, sure, I love you.
Yeah.
In its thought process, it's just being supportive and helpful, right? It's just kind of reaffirming what you're thinking, what you're believing.
I'm pretty sure that chatbot can't be held up on charges. So, I agree.
Oh, but the company can.
Yeah. Well, and
especially in good old England, right? This is not the United States. The company could be brought up on charges. The person who wrote that code could be brought up on charges, and that's kind of where I'm.
Unless they work for the government, in which case you couldn't bring them up on charges. Just want to point that out, folks.
That's a good point, John. We're short on time, so we're going to move on here a little. Now they're going. North Carolina passes sweeping surprise ban on downzoning.
This is a very interesting article. Reason, we get a lot of stuff from Reason. I don't know which live camera.
There's no. We're on the screen.
Okay.
So what has happened is North Carolina has said that you can no longer rezone somebody's property to eliminate what they are currently doing with it.
Yeah.
So if let's say you have a business that's in, let's say, a fast food joint, right? And the city decides, I don't want fast food joints in this area of town anymore on this street, so we're going to rezone the fast food joint so you can now only have medical offices there. Right?
Or low-income housing.
Or low-income housing or whatever. And so in 2 years, you're going to have to sell or change your business, right? Well, now what North Carolina has said is, no, you are essentially grandfathered in. You have to, if you want to change the zoning of your property, you have to sign off on it.
Yeah. You have to give them permission to do it. And where it's even more important, though, is in housing. When you have gentrification and all the rest of that. So people get in and they like it, and I like it this way. So the city council gets together and passes a resolution that you like it that way. We're not going to let more people in. We're not going to allow high density versus the low density now. We're not going to allow apartment buildings in suburbia or all the rest of that stuff. Now you have some. What's interesting about this is nobody's taking credit for it. They're acting as if this thing that went through, that got passed by the legislature, just appeared out of thin air. They're saying, I don't know how that got in there. And now, if they want it out of there, they've got to jump through an awful lot of hoops to get it out of there. I think it's wonderful.
No, yeah, it's a great thing.
I'd love for us to slip something like that past our legislature.
It's a huge protection of your property rights. So what you're using your property for be it your home or your business, the 50% plus one cannot force you to change it.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing for freedom, for property rights, and
the NIMBYs can't take over, nor the YIMBYs can take over. It's carving property rights in stone as they should be.
Yeah. And which brings us to the next one, because interest in Trump's freedom cities, right, has grown. People are starting to look into the idea of, now let's remind people what these freedom cities are. Trump wants to create cities that are on lands that are now owned by the federal government, right? A lot of people will say he wants to put it in national parks. No. There's a lot of land. Most of Nevada is owned by the federal government.
Close down military bases where infrastructure is already in place. There's already roads, there's already sewers, there's already power, and they're just sitting there doing nothing. Yeah, you might have to clean up some super sites to get it, habitable again, because you don't want people to live over what troops had to live over, right? But there's lots of places. I mean, look at Treasure Island, for example.
Yeah.
It was basically a nuclear submarine base, and then Willie Brown stole it. Just decided it was part of San Francisco, and look at the housing that's there now. I mean, so there's lots of opportunity, and everywhere else you have the NIMBYism going on. Yeah. So you can't build anything. I mean, there's lots of open land south of San Francisco. Can you build on it? No. There's lots of open land north of San Francisco. Can you build on it? No. But if you got this basically wasteland that the government's owning that's not generating any income at all, with all the infrastructure in there, why not build cities on it, and build cities that don't have all the crazy zoning restrictions and regulations and all the rest of that stuff, so commerce can happen, so entrepreneurial spirit can take over.
What it's exposing is that there is a desire for freedom.
Yeah.
Right? Not everybody wants to live in an HOA. Not everybody where they control, what your color of your house is.
I live in two.
I feel for you, John. I feel for you. I really do.
I have my little HOA and then a bigger HOA.
And a big old HOA. But the interest in freedom is growing, right? We've seen it in Argentina. We've seen it, even half the people who voted for Trump didn't vote for Trump. They voted against those other people who are less free than Trump is.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where that's going. But we're going to move on again, because we're talking about money and how much Biden has spent for DEI education. So it's under scrutiny. He spent over $1 billion has been allocated to DEI grants. Now, we don't actually know exactly how much it is. We just know it's kind of over $1 billion.
200. Well, we know there's about one organization did the research and found 229 individual grants were identified. What they couldn't find is all the hidden grants that probably originated from the U.S. government, because what the government's favorite thing, George Soros, starts an NGO and funds it. And once it's funded, since it's doing something that our government wants, but it's actually completely illegal for our government to do it, but it's legal for the nonprofit to do it, they start giving that nonprofit government grants. So it's probably 5 times that number.
And then those nonprofits go off and give grants to other left-wing organizations that are even farther left-wing, and that's how it kind of works. Can we see the next graphic, please? So it's $489 million of race-based hiring grants.
Oh, which is not constitutional, by the way, folks.
It's against illegal. all kinds of laws.
It's illegal to hire based on race, or deny hiring based on race.
$169 million on DEI mental health, whatever that is. I'm a big proponent of mental health. I actually don't have a problem spending the money on mental health. It saves us money in the long run. But I don't know what DEI mental health is. Yeah. Mental health is individualist. Right.
That's because you're a fascist, man. If you weren't a fascist, you'd know what it is.
Right. So I don't mind them spending money on mental health. I do mind them not spending it on individual mental health. DEI mental health is a useless term.
DEI mental health is really simple. It's whatever people identify as DEI, and if they can't get it, their mental health is impaired, so they get money for not being able to inflict DEI on other people. It's pretty straightforward when you think about it. And
another $343 million on general DEI initiatives. And as we've seen in businesses are dumping DEI left and right as fast as they can, because they've finally done the numbers, they've punched the numbers and says, it's costing us $1 boatload of money. They told us it was going to make us money. They told us it was going to save us money, and it's actually costing us a boatload of money and customers. So not only is it the expense,
and good employees,
but the
and it's basically racism.
All right, can we go to the next graphic, please? All right, so here it is. It's the Department of Education stance. As we've got a nice graphic of burning cash, because that's essentially is what's happening. You know, for the DEI focus areas, it's their strategic plan. They've actually embedded it in their plans for the future. You know, equity mentions, they've 77 times. Equity, as we've talked here a million times, equity is a meaningless term. It means nothing. It means whatever the person who's using it wants it to mean, or the person who's hearing it thinks it means. There's no actual connection to it. And diversity has been mentioned 19 times in the strategic plan. And you don't need to mention diversity 19 times if you actually practice it.
No.
It's a marketing strategy. Can we go to the next graphic? And so future spending, $1 billion in funds not yet spent. They've got $1 billion that are allocated that they have not yet spent, and that's a conservative estimate. As we've talked about earlier, it likely vastly underscores the details of this kind of thing. And most of these grants are multi-year grants, 2-3-year grants. So it's very hard to pull them back.
To ungrant them.
Yeah. And are we on one more graphic, I think, or are we done? Next one. So John, so we can go back a graphic if you guys would please. So what do you got, John? Biden administration has been just spinning us into oblivion. And we're on education, and our education is worse now than it's ever been.
Yeah, and we spend more money than anybody in the world, I think, by far.
By far,
like our military. We spend, and we don't have military that's 10 times as good as the rest of the world. And a big part of it is because of DEI.
Well, and a big part of it, now there is some of it, right? Things in America cost more, so we're always going to end up spend more for the same thing, but not that much. No, and so we should be saving on some of our efficiency because we have everything can be done here. We don't have to go. We don't really have to outsource. Country outsource. We could. We could mine everything we need here. We could, produce everything here.
Well, but we can't because of environmental regulation. Because the courts. Every time there's any major project, these hardcore environmental organizations don't want something to happen. They sue, they delay a project for 4 years, and 80% of the time the project goes through. But because it's 7 years later, it costs way more.
John, we are out of time. Thank you for being here. Thank you guys for watching us. Have a good night. Please remember to love everybody and have a very, very
Merry Christmas. And thank you to the crew, always.